Tonight's program on Intervention to Durable Recovery, The Power of Family, will be presented by Debra and Jeff J. Debra and Jeff are best-selling authors, popular speakers, and highly experienced clinicians. Their best-selling book, Love First, A Family's Guide to Intervention, has helped thousands of families to help their loved one initiate recovery. And Debra's new book, It Takes a Family, describes a revolutionary technique that enables families to unite in a recovery team that maximizes the potential for a successful outcome for all involved. Jeff's recent book, Navigating Grace, recounts a gripping journey through perilous ocean waters and through his own soul to find hope and serenity. Jeff and Debra have a national private practice that provides clinical services and training, including intervention and structured family recovery. Please join me in welcoming Debra and Jeff.
Thank you. Jeff's going to talk first, so I'll be back later.
The most important thing is my name's Jeff and I'm an alcoholic and drug addict. And this past October 4th, I celebrated 36 years clean and sober. Which is remarkable because I'd been sleeping under bushes in the city parks, homeless and penniless out in California. I've been hitchhiking back and forth across the country for years, just an absolute madman. And I'm not here to give you a whole long story, but I am here to say that if it hadn't been for a loving family intervention and a family that did not give up on me year in and year out, I would have never made it into the hospital and into the treatment that I needed to save my life. So I'm a big believer in intervention, both personally and professionally. If people had waited for me to hit bottom, I had actually been on the bottom for quite a long time and it wasn't having the desired effect. You know, I was bleeding from both ends. I had a bleeding ulcer, a bleeding colon, transient neuropathy of the legs, and I still didn't think that I had an alcohol or drug problem. I just thought I had a little cash flow problem. And if I could get another 50 bucks together, everything would be great. Which is pretty normal, actually. So like I say, if it hadn't been for my family doing the intervention and getting me into treatment, I don't think I would have survived. So with that, I'm going to go into my part of the talk, which is on intervention, and then Debra will be talking about structured family recovery. And I'm just going to be giving you an overview. I'm going to talk for about 45 minutes, and then Debra will take over and do her part. So let's see what we've got here. Okay, so we're going to talk about a new paradigm that goes, using the power of family, going from active addiction to durable recovery, long-lasting sobriety, and keeping family involved in the whole process. Because we don't want just, ideally, of course, we want to get the addict into treatment and into recovery. Great, fabulous, wonderful. What about if the family stays the same? What about if we don't undo that, if we don't dismantle that enabling system? Not too good. Ideally, we want both the addicted person and the family getting into recovery at the same time, working their AA program here, working their Al-Anon program here, getting everybody working the steps with a sponsor and a home group and a service commitment and all that stuff. That's where you get a good result. That's where you get a better result than just having the addict in treatment and getting well. Because if that environment doesn't change, because oftentimes we wind up going back to family and we're connected to them no matter what. If they're not getting well, we can turn things upside down. So the old paradigm was, you gotta wait till they hit bottom. There's nothing you can do. Just gotta wait till they hit bottom. How do you think that is sounding to all the people that lost a loved one to opiates this year? Their bottom had no bounce. I would like to suggest that we can't wait for people to hit bottom anymore. If you're doing a good love first style intervention, that's a method, which I'm going to talk about, of raising the bottom to right now, which is what we need to do. We really can't afford to wait. So we would have the old paradigm is you hit bottom, get them in detox, get them in treatment, maybe. You know, it's pretty tough these days. Fortunately, we have Dawn Farm, which is a fabulous provider of services, and you can really get good long-term and transitional housing, the whole 9 yards, but that's often not the case. If you're using your Blue Cross, you might only get, 5 days worth of spin dry detox, and then you're off into IOP. How do you think that's going to go? I wouldn't wish that on anybody. That's treatment, though, I guess, by some definition. And then if you're really lucky, you get into the 12-step community. Finally, an oasis of hope. What's missing? Well, the disease is in control. We're waiting around for the disease. Okay, is he going to hit bottom? How's he going to do when he hits bottom? Does he die? Does he, we're kind of leaving it all to the disease. We're just standing back and, okay, nothing we can do. I don't think so. Treatment is only for the patient. Don't like that model. Oh yeah, we got a little family program and stuff like that, but it's not enough. We work really, 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 really hard to get our addicted loved ones, like moi, into AA and doing what they're supposed to do and everything else. Do we work that hard to get the family into Al-Anon? Haven't really had a good method for that. You can detox the alcoholic. How do you detox the chief enabler? It's harder. But it's harder and it takes longer. You can detox the biggest, baddest heroin addict in Michigan in, 5 to 7 days. Not that they're going to be feeling great, but you know what I mean? You're not going to be able to do that with the chief enabler. And a lot of people want to throw out that old terminology, but it works for me. It's clear enough. There's insufficient support, and recovery is frankly unlikely unless you're lucky enough to get into a long-term program like Dawn Farm that can really offer a lot of support. Most programs do not offer that much support. So what can we do differently? Well, we can activate the power of family from the get-go by doing a good structured family intervention where we're going to bring everybody together, and I'll tell you how we do that, by having better and longer treatment, by having structured family recovery where we really make sure that those family members get into a good, solid 12-step program of recovery with a sponsor and a home group, working the steps, and doing the thing, just like we're asking our addicted loved one to do. Why would we as family do less? In some ways, we've been affected even more because we were pretty much sober for the whole ride to the bottom. Because when the alcoholic or addict is going on their cruise to the bottom, the family is going right along with them. Only they're awake. I really wasn't awake. It was years later I realized what I'd put my family through. Jeez, it's awful. Years of it. I'm hitchhiking around trying to outdo the life of Jack Kerouac. They're dying. So, intervention. We don't wait for the disease. We want to use that power of connection. Boy, is this important. It's not just mom and dad sitting in the kitchen going, you better stop drinking. Doesn't work, right? But there is a way that does work if we use a method to organize and focus the power of love and concern through the greater family system and the friends. I'll tell you something. This might sound a little weird. My cocaine dealer told me I had a drinking problem. He did his own little one-man intervention in a car one day. He was giving me a ride. He's like, Jeff, I got to talk to you about something. I'm like, what? And he's talking to me about my drinking. The truth is that, the friends that we involve in an intervention do not have to be angels. They don't have to be in recovery themselves. Many times people can see, even people who are actively drinking and drugging can see that a guy like me is on a much different course. I'm not even making any attempt to be functional. Oh, I might be making an attempt, but I'm not doing too well. And everybody can see it. And anybody who cares about me doesn't want to see me die. It happened more than once that people who were guilty, guilty, guilty of partying too much for me, pulled me aside and said, you know, there's no shame in asking for help, Jeff. But they never did it together. They never did it with my brother, my sister, my mom, my dad, my aunt, my uncle, a few friends, all together, all organized, all knowing what the plan was going to be, with the treatment ready to go and everything else. And that's the difference. It's like a lot of other things in life. Planning and preparation equals success. There's an old saying that luck is where preparation meets opportunity. Preparation means everything, and we can create the opportunity. So, quickly I want to go through these things. You can't help an alcoholic until he wants help. These are the 3 most damaging myths. Can't help an alcoholic addict unless he wants help. If you can't help an addict until he wants help, what will get him to want help? That's a little different question. That's something to think about. How about not paying the rent? Just something to hold in reserve, not something we're going to put up front. Usually not something we even have to say, because the person will have never seen such a well-organized group. Here's something Betty Ford said. She had 2 interventions. She said, I hadn't a clue what an intervention was when I became the focus of one a quarter century ago. I mean, the First Lady of the United States, living in the White House. The first one didn't take. I was angry with both my daughter Susan and Dr. Joe Cruz, who dared to trespass into my home and suggest I had a problem. I rose up on my high horse and threw them out. I try not to think about it too often, as I feel ashamed and embarrassed when I do. But the second intervention had a different ending. Surrounded by the family who loved me, this intervention saved my life. Not only did it save her life and get her into long-lasting, durable recovery, she went on to help tens of thousands of people by founding the Betty Ford Center and really making it more possible for women to come forward and say, using a phrase from today, me too. I have an alcohol problem. I have a pill problem. I have a drug problem. You know, as the First Lady, she made it okay. She broke stigma before we ever knew what stigma was. Treatment won't work if she doesn't want it. Another myth, another thing we tell ourselves. But the truth is, it's not how you get into treatment that counts. It's what happens once you get there. That was true of me. I didn't just magically wake up one day and say, oh yeah, that's a great idea. I'm going to go to a hospital and then I'm going to go to a treatment center. Fabulous. Can't wait. No, I wanted to leave every other day. I mean, it really took me 2 or 3 weeks to settle down and accept that this was what I really needed to do. If people had again, pinned it on, you know, that Jeff has to want to do it, I wouldn't have stayed. It took me, like I say, 2 or 3 weeks to really commit to the process and doing what I needed to do. And I don't find that unusual. An alcoholic must hit bottom, taking along even the smallest children. And that's true. In families with small children, everybody gets destroyed. You know, you don't think that those 5-year-olds don't know what's going on. That kid there, he knows what's going on. He might not be able to accurately explain it, but he knows things aren't right. And so he's working overtime because the only way he can figure it out is if he was a better kid, maybe mom would stop using. Maybe dad would stop yelling at mom, or whoever it is, whatever the situation is. They put it on themselves. Can we raise the bottom now? Well, I hope so. I just want to say, these wonderfully dated videos that we have on our website, we made them in 2007 when having a virtual backdrop was really cool. And they're free, and they're on our website. There are 38 of them. That's 4.5 hours of free video that will walk you through the intervention process. I'm going to give you a little overview tonight, but there's 4.5 hours of video. Forget the backdrop, forget the way, but it will actually take you through, including a primer on addiction and enabling and everything else. Our website is lovefirst.net. And I'm not going to play the video. But there it is, whether you want to hear it or not. Intervention is kind of like the golden rule. What if it was you who was the addicted person? What if you had become one of those accidental addicts after a serious operation or a car accident, and all of a sudden you're addicted to OxyContin and you're out of control? What would you want your friends and family to do? Would you want them to sit back and wait until you hit bottom? Till you lost your job? Or some other calamity? How about if we treat others as we would want them to treat us? How about if we take care of them the way we want others to take care of us? So here's some key concepts for intervention. First of all, you create an intervention team. Who should be on this intervention team? Who should be on the intervention team? Well, who has the most influence? It doesn't necessarily mean the person that Jeff is hanging out with right now. Who has the most influence? Maybe my sister, maybe my brother, maybe my uncle. Maybe my parents, even though I'm on the outs with them. Maybe a couple of my friends who, yeah, they drink with me and they do other things, but you know what? They're holding down jobs, or they're in graduate school, or they're in whatever. They're off doing their life. They might not be angels, but they are influential. Maybe my old swimming coach. Who's influential? That's who we want on the intervention team. We want to pick up the phone and get people together and talk. Because at the end of the day, we need the support to turn that enabling system, and every addict has an enabling system. I don't care if your family is blown to pieces. You don't have a quote-unquote family the way we think about family. Family is whoever you can drink coffee with in your pajamas. That's your family. Okay? That's my kind of makeshift definition of family. Every addict has an enabling system of one kind or another. What we want to do in intervention, in the run-up to the intervention, is shut down that enabling system and turn it into an intervening system that can actually lend some real help. So the intervention team will ultimately become the structured family recovery team, and Debra will talk about that, but let me keep going. So how do you start the team? First, get the meeting. I remember years ago in the early 90s, I was doing a big project with Hazelden and Betty Ford Center. This is before they merged. And we actually raised $1 million to do this television show and this publication, this audio-video program. And there was a guy who was helping, lead the charge on raising this money. And he had one rule when we were trying to, line somebody up to see if we could get a little donation out of them. Just get the meeting. You don't have to work everything out in advance. Get the meeting. Get the meeting. Get mom and dad and sister and brother and these friends and maybe the swim coach or whatever. Let's get together and talk. It takes some doing, it takes some phone calls, but people will come. Why? Because they know Jeff is dying. And they're going to be getting together for the funeral anyway. It's time to talk. So get the meeting. You don't have to have all the details worked out. Don't let your perfectionism or your worry or your anxiety stop you from getting that meeting. Let everyone talk about their view of the situation, and let me give you a hint. As you go around the room to have everybody share what they know about what Jeff's doing, start off with somebody who's really got the goods. You know who's really got the goods? My sister. Those damn little sisters know everything. They do. And then maybe the friend who the family isn't too sure about because he drinks too much or uses drugs or whatever. but he's willing to come to try to save my life. Oh boy, he knows too. And after he's heard the sister, he's going to spill it all. And then by the time you get around to my grandfather or my uncle who doesn't know anything, they're just going to say, oh my God, I didn't know any of this. We got to do something. You know, sign me up. What do we have to do? That kind of a gathering is going to create urgency. It's going to galvanize the team. And if you have a method, you can, hold it up. Well, we bought the book Love First. We're going to follow the directions, or we're going to follow the free videos online, or maybe we're going to hire an interventionist. Whatever it is, we got a plan, and we're going to follow the plan. We're not going to make it up out of thin air. I'm just so happy because the clock in the room isn't working in the back there, so I can take all the time I want until Debra stamps out here. Oh! I actually only have 15 minutes left. I'm about 1/4 of the way through my talk. Ugh. Okay, and follow directions. I'm going to try to speed up. Initial training. The method that's laid out in the book makes anybody, any little group, a good intervention team. The book Love First is very step by step. All the chapters are very short, and it will guide you through the process. But basically, one of the backbones of the intervention, it's not like the intervention you see on TV. If you've ever watched the intervention show, just block it out of your mind. It's like a master class on how not to do an intervention. Okay? You'll find instructions in the book and online on how to write your intervention letters. It's not about this. It's about saying, Jeff, I'm here today as your mother. I'm the person who knew you before you were ever born. You've been the absolute love of my life since I first held you in my arms. And even before, when you were kicking and screaming down there. I don't know how I would ever gone through those tough years of divorce with your father if you hadn't been there for me. I was so proud of you when you made it to the state semifinals swimming. You were so disciplined, so great, so dedicated. The way you helped your little brother and your little sister through those tough times. I'll never forget that. I don't think our family could have held together without you. This is the exact opposite of what the addicted person is expecting to hear. It's the power of love. It's the power of connection. Why do I care? Why am I intervening? Because you mean so much to me. And every person in turn saying the same thing. So the love part of the letter is the longest part of the letter. Yes, we have something about reframing around the disease. Yes, we have a couple of facts about why we know there's a problem. Yes, we're going to ask them to go to treatment. But it's really about the love, and it's about the connection and bringing that forward in an organized way. That's what gets people to yes. And just in case it doesn't, we're willing to stop paying the rent. But we don't have to say that. They know. We also want to take time to anticipate what their objections are going to be. Susie may say, hey, listen, I'm just about to apply for a new nursing job. This intervention is a great idea, but I just can't do it. I've got a, yada, yada, yada. And we want to anticipate those objections. So we might have in some of the intervention letters, listen, Susie, we know that you're worried about, getting a new job and so forth. But the truth is that, the last 2 jobs have gone in some measure because of this problem that we're talking about today. And if you agree to get the help that we're talking about, we will make sure that we will maintain the status quo for you until you get out. We'll all chip in and help pay the mortgage. We'll make sure that Johnny and Patty get taken to school every day. We anticipate the objections that she might bring up and answer them before she ever makes them. This is not enabling when the bargain is that you're going into long-term treatment. Because you know what? In this example that I'm giving, Susie's a mom. She's going to be worried. Who's going to take care of the kids? Who's going to pay the mortgage? Who's going to do this and that? We need to anticipate those objections and have those answers ready to go. That's why the organization, that's why the planning. Who's going to take them to school? Who's going to pick them up? Bottom line consequences, people always have a misunderstanding about this. They think that the bottom line is going to be, and if you don't go, I'm never going to talk to you again. It's the exact opposite. What we're really going to say is, and this is in a separate letter, it's not in the 7-point intervention letter, it's just if the person is digging in and they're not wanting to go and we have to start talking about things, then what we want to say is we want to talk about the ways we may have enabled. Jeff, as your little brother, I got to say, I have not been talking about this with you. I always chicken out. I always sweep it under the rug, and I cover for you. I lie for you. And I just want to say that I'm ashamed of doing that, and I'm not going to do it anymore. I'm not going to lie. I'm not going to pretend this meeting didn't happen today. I'm not going to pretend any of that stuff. And in fact, I'm going to start talking to you more. I'm going to start bugging you. I'm going to ask you to accept the treatment of Dawn Farm that we're talking about today. And I'm going to keep talking to you about it until you accept the help that we're offering you. Now, I don't want to do this, so I hope you'll change your mind and go today. So again, it's not the draconian, I'm going to... It's really the power of connection on steroids. I'm not going to drop this. We're not giving up on you. We're going to keep talking. That's one thing as an addict I do not want to hear. And there's a million details. Can't talk about any of that. Strengthening the team. This is all interesting, and I don't have the time to go through it with you. Because I can tell you at 1:15 she's going to appear at the door. Power of the group. We're not going to talk about this either. We've kind of alluded to a little bit of it. The last point here says spiritual wrestling match. An intervention is a little bit like a spiritual wrestling match. Because really, it's not about trying to make some kind of an intellectual proposition. The disease owns the brain. The disease owns the brain, and the addicted person will be kicking out all kinds of reasons why they don't want to go to treatment today. This is where the battleground is. It's the heart. It's a matter of the heart. They know they got a problem. And part of them wants to go, part of them doesn't want to go. This is where we're really going for it. The spiritual wrestling match means that we always stay calm, we always stay in the love. And just like a real wrestling match, if you got one guy who's wrestling another guy, then you got a wrestling match. But if you have 6 guys wrestling one guy, it's not that much of a wrestling match. That's why the power of family, the power of the group is so important. Writing the letters, I gave you a really brief overview of this, and I'm not going to go through it again, but it's the 7-point letter writing process is very easy to follow. You'll find it in the book, you'll find it in the videos. If you're going to do an intervention, follow the directions. Don't make it up. Don't pretend that you know how to do it. I just have to say that. Like, I do not have a green thumb. And if I decided that I was going to get into gardening, it would be a really bad idea for me to just decide that I know how much or how little to water or how to fertilize or anything like that. I don't know any of that. I would need some guidance because it's not like written on the leaves, right? Same thing with intervention. We've honed these techniques. Vern Johnson is the father of modern intervention, started in the 80s. And there's been a lot of refinement in the decades since, and you can be the beneficiary of those refinements. I'm not going to go through the 7-point process, but here it is. And I'm just going to keep hitting buttons. until we get through this, because I think I have 4 minutes. I talked about the love part of the letter, and then there's the reframing. It's a medical problem, not a willpower problem or a character problem, and it needs professional treatment. We're very light on the facts, very, very brief, no judgmental language. We want to make our own commitment that we're going to stick by them. We're going to start doing structured family recovery. We're going to go to Al-Anon. We're going to go to the family program. We're going to do all that. We're going to ask them in a personal and direct way. Now is the time, etc. Like I say, it's all in the book. And now I have 3 minutes. We end with affirmation. It's really important that when you are staging an intervention, especially if you're doing it on your own, but even if you're working with a professional, you're going to have a kind of a long history and training session, then some days will pass, there'll be some letter writing, some back and forth, lining up the treatment, figuring out the job situation, figuring out childcare, all the hundreds of details that we have to look at. Then there's going to be a rehearsal meeting. And we're going to read through the letters. We're going to edit the letters. We're going to read through the bottom line letters. We're going to edit those letters. We're going to run through various scenarios of what might take place in the intervention. What are we going to do if Jeff walks out? How do we deal with that? It's in the book. We're going to have it all planned out. We're not going to freak out if he walks out because we know how to deal with it. Okay? So we're going to run through those scenarios. We're going to make sure that we've got all I's dotted and T's crossed. And then we do the intervention. Without fail, somebody calls me every week about Friday afternoon at 4 o'clock. Hey, I heard that you could give me some tips on intervention. We're going to be intervening on my brother tomorrow morning. Do you have any tips for me? And I say, yes, I do, actually. And there's this silence. And I say, don't do it. You're not ready. You're not prepared. This has been a long-standing problem, undoubtedly. I don't even need to know your story to know that. You need to take time to prepare and do it right. I think I have 1.5 minutes. Oh, I can't talk about that. It's good, though. It's in the book. I already talked about objections. We actually covered that a little bit. This would be amazing if I actually got through this. So you want to think about all these things. And like I say, I mean, plan, plan, plan. You got to have it all ready in advance. Intervention is about love, but it's also about planning. I always tell families, it's a great day. Everybody's very nervous. But this is the day we're going to close the chapter on active addiction and open up the chapter on recovery. So we want to go in with a lot of love. Yeah, Jeff might be a little freaked out. He might be a little angry at first, but we just want to love him up. You know what I mean? Because he's got a big problem, but we got a big solution, and we are all together on it. We're going to get him the detox he needs. We're going to get him the treatment he needs. We're going to take care of the dangling problems out there if he decides to go along with it. And we are going to get into this process as a family. This is how it can really work. What Debra is going to talk to you about is the power of changing then that intervention team immediately upon getting him into treatment. We're going to start the structured family recovery process. So he starts his treatment process, family's going to start the structured family recovery process. And now we are going to change microphones. This microphone goes on her right side, this one goes on her left side, and I bring up her presentation. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Jeff. Hi, everybody. It's so nice to see all of you out here 2 days before Thanksgiving on a rainy night. I just want to thank you. Jeff and I were like, do you think we'll get 10 people? So this is really nice to see all of you. Thank you. So I'm going to be talking about what I call structured family recovery. And what I'm going to be doing is giving you a little foundation information, and then we're going to look at how this process works, okay? So let me move forward here. So when I start this talk, I like to talk about something that's a big problem in our field, and it is not an new problem. This is an old problem. It's nothing that's going to surprise you. And the problem is that after people leave treatment, 50 to 90% relapse in the first year. Does that surprise anybody in this room? No, it does not. There was an excellent study done just a few years ago, and they really they took into account all the different types of treatment, different lengths of treatment, different quality of treatment, and they said probably we can settle on the number 70% of the people that leave treatment relapse in the first year. So we're just going to use that number, 70%. Now, does that happen randomly? No, of course it doesn't, does it? It really is about getting the right level of support to manage this chronic illness once we leave treatment. So, we have this problem, and we're going to catch up to ourselves. But before we talk about it anymore, we really need to talk about what we're up against. And this is my favorite little story to really illustrate what we are up against with this disease. You see, there's this little fellow, and he's lost everything to his alcoholism. He's lost his wife, his children, his home, his career, and finally, his self-respect. All he has left on him are the clothes on his back, enough money to check into a flop house, and a half-empty bottle of whiskey. And he gets into that flop house and he sits down on this saggy little cot and he looks at that bottle and he says, "You, I thought you were my friend, but no, because of you I've lost everything." He gets up, he gets to the window, he looks at the bottle, he goes, "We're through." He opens up the window, he cocks his arm back to throw that bottle of whiskey out the window and he hears swoosh. And he looks at the bottle and he says, "Was that an apology?" Right? That's what we're up against. It is that moment, you see. Who are my football fans here? What do you keep your eye on when you watch a game? The ball, right? You keep your eye on the ball. This is our ball. That moment, that swoosh, was that an apology? That is our ball, okay? So, we need to start our conversation with treatment. We have great treatment in this country. Some are better than others. You know, a mother talked to me before this presentation out in the lobby and said, "I love this program, Dawn Farm, because it gets people into the community," right? And so we have a vast differences in what treatment means, but we just have this kind of one word. So the first thing is, if somebody says, you know, my loved one went through treatment and it just didn't work, I say, tell me about that treatment. And it might be that they were someplace for 8 days and they're addicted to heroin. Would we expect there to be success? Probably not, right? When we talk about treatment, there is something very important to understand. Treatment is dealing with the acute problem. Regardless of how long treatment is, 30 days, if you're lucky enough to get 90, my goodness, 120. If you go into extended care and you're talking about maybe 6 months or a year, it is all about the acute problem. But it is when I get out of treatment, right? When I step out of treatment, that is when recovery begins. Do we all understand that? That treatment is not recovery. And at that time, I have a chronic illness that needs to be managed, correct? And it needs to be managed as long as I am still living and breathing. So treatment is this little sliver of time, and then my recovery goes on and on and on. Okay? So what do we focus on most? Treatment. Not that it isn't incredibly important, because I would say there's a huge percentage of people that probably would not be in recovery if it were not for treatment. But we have to understand that at the end of the day, the most important thing is that program of recovery, okay? So, treatment and recovery have two different roles. We understand this. If we talk about diabetes and somebody's in a diabetic coma, they end up in a hospital. The hospital understands how to stabilize them, they educate them, they talk about what they need to do when they leave the hospital, correct? And the person with the diabetes gets it, yes, I get that, yes, absolutely, I'm going to do it. 9 months later, they're in the same state back in the hospital. But do we say hospitals do not work? We don't. Do we say hospitals do not work? But what do we say when somebody relapses about treatment? Treatment doesn't work. But at the end of the day with recovery, it's what was that program like? Was there an adequate level of support that was consistent? And usually the answer is no. Okay? So, when we're talking about relapse, it is recovery that prevents relapse, not treatment. Treatment can get you ready for recovery, but it's once you're out in the world, it's really those recovery programs, walking into Alcoholics Anonymous, walking into other 12-step programs, getting sponsors and working a program. Very quickly, we're going to look at SPECT images. Some of you may have seen these before, but I think it's worthwhile because this is the brain we're talking about. This is a nice, healthy brain. This is the brain you and I want to have. It's full, it's robust, lots of activity. Now we're looking at an alcoholic who's a binge drinker on weekends, and look at the difference in that brain. What does that Swiss cheese look? That is the lack of activity going on in the brain. The neuroscientists will tell you the brain is atrophying as well. It looks like acid was poured off of it, and it poured across it. And also, the function changes. The prefrontal cortex that's so responsible for our success in life, making good decisions, impulse control, it's the CEO of the brain, is not working as well. The emotional brain, the limbic system, is not working as well. And so this is what it looks like with alcoholism. This is a nice healthy brain from the chin up. Here it is with alcoholism, okay? Now we're looking at cocaine. Okay, this is a 24-year-old, methamphetamine, 28-year-old, okay? Marijuana. You know, we have a lot of discussions in this country today about marijuana. But is this the brain? This is an 18-year-old that's been smoking marijuana for 3 years. Is this the brain you would want to have? Then we're looking at opiates. And what we have here is a heroin addict, 10 years using heroin, 7 years using methadone. Some people call methadone recovery. I do not, because that is not the brain of recovery. Okay? So, this is the great news, though, before and after recovery, 1 year. You know, AA has a saying, you will get your brain back in 5 years. Science is actually, in many ways, catching up to Alcoholics Anonymous. And they said, oh, it's looking pretty good after 1 year. Okay? Drug and alcohol free. So one of the things I want to talk about is a very depressing thing to think about the relapses among the people that we love. The people in our family, the friends, colleagues, our neighbors. But there are these people that do incredibly well. And I call them the winner circle, and you can kind of see who they are from these photographs. In the center, we have a physician. Here we have a lawyer, and we have a pilot. Because when they have a problem that is identified, that's interfering with their work, they get into these specialized programs that give them, depending on the state, 3 to 5 years of support, of serious programming. Why? Well, you don't want to be in the plane with the pilot, right, who's been drinking. You don't want the surgeon who's smoking crack, you know, opening you up on the table. So they're getting something that our loved ones don't get. And for them, by the way, relapse is not a part of recovery. I travel around the country enough that I hear a lot of people say to me, well, you know, relapse is part of recovery. It is not part of recovery, it is the disease, okay? So when you start looking at the winner's circle, the docs, the pilots, the attorneys, lasting sobriety is the expectation in those programs. And that's very important, as we will come to see. Setting the Standard for Recovery Physicians Health Program, you can Google it and read it. It's a very friendly read. It's extremely interesting, but I'm going to go over the highlights. Dr. DuPont and his team, they looked at 904 addicted doctors for over 5 years. And 16 different PHPs, that means 16 different states, 16 different state programs. 50% were alcoholic, 35% had an opioid addiction, and 14% of those IV users. 15% other drugs, 31% alcohol and other drugs, 17% had legal problems due to their addiction. Doctors tend to be sicker when they get into treatment than the rest of us. Why? Access to a lot more drugs. They think they can handle it. What about the family members? Doctors, what? The big paycheck? Right? So they're going to really enable that. We don't want to ruin their reputation. And even among colleagues, they will often enable their fellow doctors, correct? So when we talk about this, what they say in here is that these tend to be sicker people when they come in. And I will guarantee you, when I worked inpatient for Hazelden, I was a counselor both for the men's unit and the women's unit while I was there and facilitated the family program. The one thing I can tell you is that when anybody had a doctor or a lawyer that was going to be new to their caseload, there was an audible groan. Why would that be? These are tough people to work with. They're extremely smart, right? And they're typically highly resistant to treatment, okay? So the interesting thing with this study is among these 16 different programs, 78% of these physicians had 0 relapse in the first 5 years. What would we do with those numbers, right? 15% had 1 relapse in 5 years. So now we're at 93%, and 7% had more than 1 relapse. In this study, what they say in their conclusion is that the length of time in treatment helps prevent relapse. The length of time in treatment plus this extended program. Okay, we know that. But I love this, but also allows relapsers to succeed. That is so important because that is about keeping our eye on the ball. Every so often, it becomes a fad again in our field to everybody talk about doing outcome studies. When you've been in the field long enough, you've heard it enough, and the studies that they do, they find it's very difficult to get good outcome numbers because I don't have to tell you why. They're dealing with addicts, right? And so that fad has been going on for a while. And first of all, I say, well, when you get your numbers, you're not going to put them on your marketing materials, first of all. But second of all, what I think about is why is it that we're putting so much focus on the people who are successful? Yes, that's important, but we really need to put our focus on the people who are relapsing, right? It's what we don't understand about those people, and that we have got to help them. And that's what structured family recovery really does, and it takes it, in a sense, takes this holy grail of recovery for these impaired professionals and puts that power into the hands of the family. So, Jeff already talked to you about these. I heard him, so I'm not going to go through that myth, but I want to say this. We do not risk the doctor's patients, do we? And we do not risk the lawyer's clients. We certainly do not risk the passengers on a jet airliner. But what about the families? We risk them all the time. Every relapse, there is an entire family. And I heard Jeff say it, but the whole family hits bottom with their beloved alcoholic or addict, okay? And the undoing of the family is just not okay. So let's look at this thing that we call structured family recovery. I'm going to show you a little video as an introduction. We'll just take a minute to watch this.
My life has pretty much been defined by alcoholism, and I'm not the alcoholic. You know, my parents, I think for a lot of people when they got married, people thought it was the fairy tale marriage. It just seemed perfect. Alcoholism was definitely running the show in our family, and I know this because my very first memory is hiding behind this chair that my mother was sitting in, and she was crying, and my father, he was standing over her and he was yelling, and I looked at my father in the face and I yelled, "Leave my mommy alone." I couldn't be a child. I had to be an adult, and I had to take action against this disease. My name is Debra J., and I'm the author of It Takes a Family, a cooperative approach to lasting sobriety. Although we have the best treatment for addiction in the world, when our loved ones come home, those treatment professionals don't come home with them. And it's not news to anybody that the relapse rate is really high because this is a chronic illness and it needs to be managed through a program of recovery. And so often alcoholics and addicts aren't able to do that. They fall short. But there's a group of people, interestingly, that has the lowest relapse rate. And those people are addicted doctors, addicted lawyers, and the work that is done with them creates this incredible culture of recovery. We started doing it in our own private practice, and it was astonishing. Families came together in the most powerful way. And then I went to Hazelden Publishing and I talked to them about it. I said, "This is really astonishing." And they said, "You know, yeah, write a book." And in It Takes a Family, I looked at all that and I created this framework. It creates this culture of recovery using the entire family that could change everything. I think the thing today, though, that breaks my heart the most, and certainly having grown up as a family member with alcoholism, is how often still today people believe that they have to let the alcoholic hit bottom. But nobody says to the family, guess what? When you're alcoholic, when your addict hits bottom, you hit bottom too. The solution for the alcoholic can never be the undoing of the family. I mean, some families they're so afraid of even asking the addict anything. They'll even whisper to me, they're like, "You know, are we allowed to ask if she's going to meetings? You know, what can we do? What can we not do?" Because as a family, they're terrified of this whole experience called recovery. It Takes a Family, what it does, first of all, is it gives families back the hope, number one. But then, and this is key, this is what's really important, it takes the hope and it puts it into action. But not only do the relapse rates drop dramatically, but families start to come together again. I'd like to read an excerpt from the book, and this is the introductory chapter, which is titled, "We Come Home Together." Coming together takes the powerless and makes them powerful. Structured family recovery brings this power to the family, and in cooperation with the larger recovery community, stands firm in the face of addiction, which trespassed into our homes and multiplied itself into our lives. We crowd addiction out by building a family life brimming with togetherness and recovery, even though we may start out not knowing our way back to each other. I can't help but think how different it would have been my family if we had had structured family recovery and all the wonderful memories we could have made together that we never made. And that's why I'm so passionate about this, and that's why I wrote this book.
With structured family recovery and that introduction, what I want you to understand is that in my field, in the field of treatment, really in so many ways we kicked the family to the curb. You know, maybe we had a little family program, but we didn't have a big role for them. And what structured family recovery does in the most appropriate way, it puts the family smack dab in the middle of recovery. okay? So the first thing we do is we create a recovery team. Jeff would have talked about intervention teams, but a recovery team is different than an intervention team in the sense that it's smaller, it's more intimate. My rule of thumb on a structured family recovery team or SFR team is that these are the people that you will sit around the kitchen table in the morning for breakfast, in your pajamas. Maybe you haven't even combed your hair yet, right? So these are the people that we are the closest with. That's what makes this team. And then structured family recovery is simple. Simple is important, right? You know, one of the great slogans, of course, in Alcoholics Anonymous and Al-Anon is keep it simple. Okay, so it's 2 steps. One is a weekly SFR family meeting, and the other is a 12-step meeting. We'll talk about the SFR meeting in a minute, but the 12-step meeting for the families, we ask them to go to one Al-Anon meeting or other 12-step meeting for families, like Family Anonymous or Adult Children of Alcoholics. Why only one? They're not in treatment. If we said, oh, 90 and 90, forget it. The families would go running screaming, right? So the way I look at it, get everybody to do one Al-Anon meeting a week, get a sponsor, and then how many Al-Anon meetings they need, that's between them and their sponsor, right? For the alcoholic or addict, they're coming out of treatment with a treatment plan, and in that treatment plan, there should be something about 12-step attendance. So in that treatment plan, we would follow the recommendations of the treatment professionals in structured family recovery. So now let's look at a structured family recovery meeting. The whole idea of simplicity. Remember, number 1, this is not therapy. What happens in therapy? We talk about the past, usually, right? And we talk about problems. This is about what we do today, structured family recovery, and it's about solutions, okay? So, number 1, it's on conference call. I'm going to tell you right now, even if all those family members lived in the same town, you are not going to get everybody to come into a counselor's office week in and week out, are you? There's no way, okay? By conference call, guess what? We all have a phone. I do not need to get childcare. I don't need to drive through rush hour. I don't need to get dressed. I don't need to put makeup on. I can be in bed in my pajamas with a cold. I can still call in. I can be at my kid's soccer game. I can still call in. I can be on vacation. I can be anywhere, okay? It is 1 hour a week. We start on time. We end on time. Everybody understands this isn't going to be, is it an hour? Is it an hour and 15 minutes? Because every time you make it less simple, it's less likely people will stick. You have to make it simple. There's a simple format, which we'll look in the middle, we'll look at in a minute, but in this book, which looks really fat and like, oh my gosh, do I have to read that much? No, because there's an entire year of structured family recovery meetings in the back of the book. When you go to AA or Al-Anon, there's a format. You understand exactly what's going to happen. Every week with structured family recovery, exactly the same thing, in the sense that there's the same format every week. And right away, and it's built into the program, is the team members start focusing on themselves, okay? Family members haven't focused on themselves, oftentimes for a very, very long time, right? Because they are constantly watching that addict as if they're living with a tiger in the house. Even if it's sleeping in the corner, they've got one eye on it, because they don't know what's going to happen next, right? It's the nature of the disease, okay? So, families begin structured family recovery first, and then they invite the addict to join. Why would that be? Because we have got to get families over their own objections to treatment. It's always interesting how much the families can sound like the addicted person when they are asked to go to a meeting, okay? And it is taking that leap and going to that first Al-Anon or ACOA meeting. They need to start creating a positive norm, or what we would call a good example. Because if the family is still wrestling with their own reluctance, and we bring the addict on, what's the addict going to do? They're going to mirror the family most likely. Oh, well, they said they don't need to go to Al-Anon, I don't need to go to AA, right? That's not what we want. By the time the addict is on, the family is creating a good example and able to say positive things about their own recovery, okay? And this is when something magical happens. So I want to give you a story of, I'm going to check my time, of a family that started structured family recovery. Wife was the addict, opiate addict, 59 years old, upper middle class, owned her own business, 3 grown children, 2 grandchildren, and she was addicted to opiate pain medication. And then, this was in the state of Florida, they started cracking down on the pill mills, and she couldn't get her prescriptions because she was shopping for lots of docs and had multiple prescriptions. Started buying them on the street. They were very expensive, and what does she eventually do? She starts shooting heroin, right? Now, she's had 2 previous treatments. Her addiction has spanned 20 years at this point with the pills, and never any recovery, because they also were very, very involved in their church. It was a very important part of their life. But in their particular church, they believed that the 12-step programs were against their religious faith. So they were very anti-12-step, but this time heroin changed everything. It changed everything. It took everyone to their knees. And so they decided to do structured family recovery. And they did it all together. And the thing that was amazing, first of all, she is over 3 years sober right now. She's never had more than 3 months sobriety. But the other thing was the family, how they came together. The 27-year-old son, he said to me, he said, you know, it used to be that when Mom would get out of treatment, we all stood back and we were pointing at her. We were watching her. We were watching her. And he said, with structured family recovery, we came together and we held hands and we all stepped inside the circle of recovery together. And all of a sudden, you have an entire family involved in the 12-step recovery programs. And so when the mother, she was in treatment for 10 months, when she got out of treatment and she was involved in structured family recovery on the phone with the family during that period, when she got out of treatment, what a difference for her. She was not the fish out of water. Everybody was speaking the same language, right? She could not hide in the shadows with her disease. And everybody, it was so inclusive to her. And the family today will say to me that this is really the only thing that changed, is that this program got us all to work our own program. Structured family recovery did. So what does it look like? What does structured family recovery look like? So here's the back of the book, right, with the meeting. So we have it right up here. The first thing we have is an opening. The family reads it every single week on the call. They start with the opening. What is the opening statement? It's like if you've ever been in group therapy and there are group expectations, you read them all, right? So that everybody in the group understands these are the rules we need to follow. Because remember, family hasn't been through treatment. So let me read you just one of them, okay? Our team meetings are confidential. We are bound not to disclose what is said here to non-participating family members, friends, or other persons. Observing confidentiality, we create an atmosphere of trust and safety. So every week we're reminded, there's 7 of these, because otherwise family members don't know that, and they might get on the phone with a friend or a cousin or something and tell them what everybody said on the SFR meeting, and then there's a breakdown of trust. So we go through that first. Then there's a daily reading. You'll notice this is week 31, so 12 steps and 12 months of SFR. So we're on step 8, and the topic is progress. The week before, a member of the team was assigned to use their daily reader, their daily 12-step reader, like Courage to Change or Daily Reflections or whatever, to find a reading on progress. I will tell you, family members take that so seriously. I have a family, the father, the son is the addict, who's in his late 20s. The dad had a reading on forgiveness. He spent 2 hours going through every single 12-step reader they had to find the exact perfect reading for his family. They take it very seriously. And so then that person reads that and then shares about what it was in that reading that had made them choose it, and then everybody else shares. And I'll tell you a story about an addicted, she was an opiate addict, female, 27 years old, when the first meeting she joined for SFR, and her dad was reading the reading for that week. And when he finished, she broke down and started sobbing. And the SFR counselor said, "What's wrong? Why are you crying?" And she said, "I've never heard my father talk like that in my life." It was such a difference, okay? So they go through the daily reading. Then we have report, discuss, and plan. People get really excited for this, you know? Like, you know, the family members finally found that home group, that Al-Anon meeting they really love. You know, what went well in my recovery this past week? Or they've got their sponsor, right? That you talk about the good things. Or like, I was at this meeting and this woman said something that it's like she was speaking to me. It was phenomenal, and I want to share it with all of you, okay? What could be improved, and do I want feedback? This is the only time anyone will address or talk to anybody else on the team. We don't do crosstalk. Nobody's giving anybody advice. There's none of that going on. We're only talking about ourselves. But if I want feedback, if somebody wants feedback, I'm going to ask, who would you like to give you the feedback? Well, I'd like it from my mom, okay? Or no, I don't need any feedback. I pass. What insights did I gain from my 12-step experiences in the last week? From my assignment, and what new recovery behaviors will I practice this upcoming week? Imagine that your entire family, that everybody that is the closest and the most meaningful in your life is going through that week in and week out. It is so powerful to hear. And when you're the addicted person, I think what surprised me the most is how much recovering alcoholics and addicts, even when they're in treatment, love this. They love having their family smack dab in the recovery with them, okay? So then there are 3 paragraphs. And we read from these paragraphs, okay? Each one of them. One is learning something new. Like this one starts out, in the words of Ernest Hemingway, there is nothing noble in being superior to your fellow man. True nobility is being superior to your former self. By now, in working our 12-step program and meeting weekly with our structured family recovery team, we most assuredly are superior to our former selves. Then the next one is going to be on the step 8. Read that. And the third one is working a program of recovery. Okay? Why do we have these paragraphs? First of all, the paragraphs lead us down the road to recovery. That's where our thinking is going to go. Each family member shares what they got out of it. So everybody hears from everybody else, brief shares. Okay? And what happens is that the thinking patterns follow the recovery message. Because if I just open it up to a family and said, okay, what would you like to talk about? How likely is it that it's going to be positive or about recovery? You think it will be? It's going to be about problems, right? Most likely it's going to be about problems. So this guides the family, and then again it becomes this most powerful thing. Because everyone is sharing and everyone is listening. And what ends up happening with this whole process, and then it ends with an assignment for the next week. We'll go through. There's the talk with your sponsor about the ways working a 12-step program has changed your relationships. This is the positive part of your relationship inventory, revealing the fruits of your efforts. It also helps you see the value of taking this next step, journal your insights, okay? And next week, they will then report on that assignment. What happens with the family with this whole process is they start talking about recovery all the other days between the structured family recovery sessions. One mom with her addicted son who's living at home right now, and he has just picked up his 9-month chip, and they're doing SFR. She said, you know, every morning we read the daily reader together. He reads his from AA, I read mine from Al-Anon, and then we share the insights that we've gained. So they build it into their daily life as well, and then really come together. So what I'd like to do is close by reading just a little something out of the book. And it is a subchapter called We Practice the Spirituality of Kindness, because I'm a true believer that we have to bring the family members back together, and we have to do it in kindness. What breaks my heart more than anything else is when I hear somebody in AA, for instance, one fellow, it was a gratitude meeting, and he said, I've been sober 12 years and my family doesn't speak to me still today. I heard a mother say, I've been sober 3 years and my adult children still will have nothing to do with me. And that is not where we want to be in our recovery. So let me share just this little reading with you from the book, It Takes a Family. True kindness doesn't sit in judgment asking, do you deserve me? Kindness is an identity we choose for ourselves. When we are kind, we have chosen not to be critical. When we are kind, we have chosen not to be angry. When we are kind, we are saying, you are valuable to me. Small kindnesses are so powerful that when we choose them, we can change a family. Some families filled with so much hurt can no longer find kindness in their hearts. But AA has a saying, act as if, act kind and you will become kind. Aristotle said it too, acting virtuous will make one virtuous. Now I want to stop here for a moment, and it doesn't mean as family members we don't have all sorts of negative emotions, and we can suffer from a lot of anxiety and resentment and everything else, but let's not take that to our family. It is not our family's job to fix that for us. We take that to our 12-step meetings and work with the sponsor, and the steps are designed to deal with anger and resentment and cleaning our own side of the street and all sorts of marvelous things to bring us back to who we really are. So I'm going to go on and read the rest of this. During active addiction, much is not beautiful and many things hurt us, and we, in all likelihood, hurt others. Kindness is hard won after so much injustice and pain. It's born of an experience that offered us little hope. Yet, once we're delivered into recovery, we are given the opportunity to repair and strengthen the fabric of our families. It takes working together, and that cannot happen without kindness. Let me say that to you again. It takes working together, and that cannot happen without kindness. And it can't. And I want to end today by saying, addict and family alike, we just want one thing. The counselors may have their jargon, there's language in the 12-step groups, and we go along with whatever we think can help, but it's because of only one thing that we're searching for, and that one thing is happiness. We want happiness again. Elizabeth Barrett Browning wrote in a poem, the earth is filled, I'm sorry, let me back up. She wrote, the earth is crammed with heaven. And I believe every family, including their beloved addict, is just looking for their little piece of heaven. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks. Thank you. Thank you very much. I wish you all a happy Thanksgiving, and thank you for all coming out tonight. And thank every single one of you for loving somebody who is addicted, because as far as I'm concerned, recovering people are the best people I know, and I'm so grateful to have so many of them in my life. Good night.